They didn't just die, they were displayed. Thousands of bodies stretched across miles, impaled on sharpened stakes, an obscene forest of flesh. Some still twitched. Others were long dead, their skin blackened under the cruel sun, their mouths frozen in silent screams. The stench of decay drowned the wind. Birds would not land. Wolves circled but would not feed. Even death seemed afraid to approach. This was no battlefield. It was a message. In this place caught between empires, between faiths, between centuries, fear ruled more completely than any king, and its face was Vlad. The year is 1448. The land, Wallachia, a jagged strip of territory nestled in the shadows of the Carpathian Mountains, caught between two titans. To the east, the Ottoman Empire, rising like a dark tide, its armies relentless, its sultans merciless. To the west, the Kingdom of Hungary, fractured, proud, weakened by corruption and civil war. Wallachia stands between them, not as a nation, but as a wound. It is not ruled, it is contested. Here voivodes rise and fall like dying stars. Kings name them, but swords decide their fate. Alliances shift with the seasons. Treachery is tradition. No man inherits the throne. He zeitzes itor dies trying. The people are peasants, chained to soil and superstition. The nobles boil splot and poison from stone halls. Foreign ambassadors bribe both sides, pulling strings that end in executions. There is no peace, there is only survival. And into this crucible, a child is born. His name is Vlad, the second son of Vlad II, Dracul Voivode of Wallachia, knight of the Order of the Dragon and servant of two masters, the Christian West and the Ottoman East. The name Dracul means the dragon, but in the whispers of the people it soon curdled into something darker. Dracula, the son of the dragon, the son of the devil. Vlad is born into a house haunted by compromise. His father bends knee to the Ottomans to keep his throne, even as he swears fealty to the Holy Roman Emperor. He plays a game that cannot be won, and the cost falls on his sons. In 1442, the boy Vlad and his younger brother Radu are handed over to the Ottomans as hostages, guarantees, living insurance policies for their father's loyalty. They are not chained, but they are not free. They grow up in Edirne, in the court of Sultan Murad II. Here, amid golden tiles and silk-robed scholars, Vlad learns Arabic, Turkish, mathematics, military strategy, and the Quran. He watches executions. He sees cruelty refined into art. He learns that mercy is a weakness and fear, a weapon sharper than any blade. His brother Radu flourishes. He is handsome, charming, pliable. He converts to Islam, gains the favor of the Sultan, and finds comfort in submission. But Vlad seethes. He remembers the humiliation of being used as a pawn. He remembers his father's compromises. He remembers how Wallachia bled while kings and sultans played their games. And he decides he will never be used again. When Vlad finally returns to Wallachia, he is no longer a boy. He is something else entirely. In late 1448, the throne of Wallachia sits empty after the defeat of its ruler in battle. Vlad sees an opportunity. Backed by the Ottomans, he claims the title of voivode at just 17. For 2 months, he rules. Then, like so many before him, he is cast out. A Hungarian-backed rival drives him into exile. But Vlad is not finished. He is gathering shadows, watching, waiting. He wanders through the mountains of Moldavia, through the crumbling courts of Hungary, through the towns of Transylvania burned but not broken. He studies betrayal. He observes how loyalty bends to fear. And in 1456, nearly a decade after his first brief reign, Vlad returns. This time, he does not ask for power. He takes it. With Hungarian support and a ruthless plan, he defeats his enemies and reclaims the Wallachian throne. But this is not a restoration, it is a reckoning. The boyars, the nobles who murdered his father and brother, who sold the country to foreigners, who feast while peasants starve, they are summoned to a grand Easter banquet in the city of Targovishte. They come in fine silks, they drink wine, they toast the new voivode. Then, at a signal, the doors close. Soldiers seize them. The elderly are impaled immediately. The young and strong are forced on a death march to the mountains, where they will labor like slaves to rebuild a ruined fortress, Puanari Vlad's own citadel of vengeance. Few will survive. This is not politics. This is purification. Vlad does not rule with law. He rules with terror. He establishes a brutal code. Thieves are dismembered, liars are boiled, traitors are impaled. Entire villages vanish overnight. When foreign emissaries refuse to remove their turbans before him, he nails the cloth to their skulls. His methods are horrifying, but they work. Trade increases. Bandits disappear. Order, enforced by agony, spreads like fire across the land. To his enemies, Vlad is a monster. To his people, he is fear made flesh. And yet, beyond his borders, forces gather once again. The Ottomans are watching. The Hungarians grow uneasy. And somewhere in the Sultan's court, his brother Radu smiles. For now, Vlad rules. But power built on blood is never stable, and the stakes he has planted will one day face him in return. He ruled with iron, blood, and silence. Vlad was now Voivode Prince of Wallachia, but in name only. He understood what the crown meant in this land. It was not security, it was a sentence, a target. To hold it, he had to become more than a ruler. He had to become fear itself. His first enemies were not foreigners, but his own people. The boyars, the noble class of Wallachia, had long wielded real power behind the throne. They were the ones who plotted, poisoned, and sold princes to the highest bidder. Vlad knew what they had done to his father. He knew the rot that festered in their halls, so he turned his gaze inward. In village after village, he hunted down the disloyal, the greedy, the indifferent. Nobles were dragged from their manors. Some were impaled in their gardens, their estates torched to ash. Others were rounded up like cattle and sent north to build his mountain fortress, stone by stone, until their hands bled and their bones broke. They called it justice, but Vlad called it cleansing. He restructured the Wallachian court with terrifying speed. The old elites were dead or disappeared, their titles handed to peasants who had proven themselves loyal not by birth, but by obedience. Power was no longer inherited. It was earned through terror and allegiance. But Vlad's brutality wasn't random. It was surgical, intentional, and he made sure the stories spread faster than the bodies could rot. He wanted them to fear him before they ever saw his face. In the west, the Kingdom of Hungary watched uneasily. Vlad had once served them. Now he ruled with complete autonomy. In the east, the Ottoman Empire demanded tribute, as it had from every Wallachian ruler before him. But Vlad refused. He would not bow again. He had knelt as a child. He had swallowed humiliation in gilded Ottoman halls. Never again. When Sultan Mehmed II sent envoys to collect tribute, Vlad received them in his throne room. The Turks refused to remove their turbans in his presence, citing custom and faith. Vlad nodded and then ordered the turbans nailed to their skulls so they would never forget again. That message echoed all the way to Constantinople, but the Sultan was not so easily deterred. Instead of invading, he tried something subtler, diplomacy laced with betrayal. He invited Vlad to his court for talks. Vlad knew better. He'd been a hostage once. He would not return as a guest. Instead, he acted first. In the winter of 1461, Vlad crossed the Danube and launched a devastating campaign into Ottoman territory. He burned villages, slaughtered entire garrisons, and left impaled bodies lining the roads like cursed mile markers. Over 23,000 Ottomans died in less than a month. Even Mehmed, conqueror of Constantinople, was stunned. A man who had shattered Byzantium now found himself challenged by a Wallachian warlord with fewer men, fewer resources, but no limits. The Sultan had no choice. He would have to face Vlad head-on. In the spring of 1462, Mehmed II marched into Wallachia with one of the largest armies the region had ever seen, 90,000 men, battle-hardened and ruthless. Vlad could not match him in open war. So he chose another way. He turned the land into a trap. His men poisoned wells, destroyed crops, evacuated villages. They stripped the forests and salted the fields. The Ottomans advanced, but they found no spoils, no food, no shelter, just smoke and silence. Then came the night. In June, under a moonless sky, Vlad led a surprise assault on the Ottoman camp. It would later be called the night attack at Targovishte. With only a few thousand men, Vlad and his riders plunged into the sleeping enemy camp, wielding torches and curved sabers. They rode with screams on their lips, striking at tents, setting fires, slashing wildly through chaos. Vlad himself aimed for the Sultan's command tent, hoping to end the war in a single stroke. He failed. Mehmed survived, but the damage was done. The Ottomans were shaken, their morale shattered, and when they resumed their march to Targovishte, they encountered something that froze even the most seasoned soldiers. It wasn't a battlefield. It was a monument to madness. 20,000 corpses, impaled on statesmen, women, children, soldiers, civilians, their bodies stretched across the outskirts of the capital like a wall of horror. Some had been dead for days, others longer. The smell was unbearable. Flies darkened the sky. Vultures refused to land. The Sultan halted. He stared at the carnage. And then he turned back. Vlad had done the impossible. He had repelled one of the greatest empires in history, not through armies, but through fear. For a brief moment he was untouchable, a legend, a demon in the flesh. But power built on terror does not hold forever. His enemies had been quiet. Now they grew bold. In the Ottoman court, his brother Raduanse, the obedient hostage, now a polished courtier and convert to Islam, emerged as a rival claimant to the Wallachian throne. The Sultan saw opportunity. Radu was pliable, charming, cooperative, the opposite of Vlad. With Ottoman backing, Radu invaded. At the same time, Wallachian nobles, those who had survived Vlad's purges or quietly resented them, began to conspire. They remembered the massacres, the executions, the banquet of death, and they knew Radu would offer them what Vlad never would: leniency. Vlad was betrayed. His allies melted away. Hungarian support faltered. His own people turned on him. By the end of 1462, the Prince of Blood found himself alone. Cornered, he fled across the border into Transylvania, hoping to find safety with the Hungarian king Matthias Corvinus. But Corvin used Asia to distance himself from Vlad's atrocities and to placate the Ottoman Shah, had him arrested instead. After 6 years of fear, Vlad was now a prisoner, a voivode without a throne, a prince without a people, a demon in a cage. He would remain in Hungarian custody for over a decade, shuttled between castles, forgotten by many, feared by all. But his story wasn't over. Not yet, because even in chains, Vlad's legend was growing, fueled by rumor, chronicled by enemies, whispered across Europe like a plague. He had become something more than a man. He was Vlad the Impaler, a name spoken not in anger, but in dread. And one day, the world would call him something else entirely: Dracula. He had once ruled with terror. Now he sat in silence. The same hands that ordered forests of the dead now lay bound in chains. The Prince of Wallachia, the butcher, the legend, the Impaler, was a prisoner. No court, no army, no throne. Just stone walls, rats, and time. In 1462, after defying the Ottomans and repelling their might through sheer horror, Vlad had fled to Hungary. He believed he would find refuge under the protection of King Matthias Corvinus, old ally, fellow Christian, and supposed friend. But the world was changing. The Ottomans were rising. Europe was terrified. And Vlad had become too much, even for those who once cheered his name. Corvinus didn't welcome him. He arrested him. The king needed peace. And Vlad's cruelty, now documented in lurid letters sent from Saxon merchants and enemies alike, gave him the perfect excuse. The accusations were severe: that Vlad murdered innocents, that he impaled women and children, that he enslaved Christian villages, burned monasteries, mutilated merchants, that he was less a ruler and more a beast. Whether all of it was true no longer mattered. Vlad's reputation had outgrown fact. He had become a symbol of Christian resistance and Christian shame. So they locked him away. His prison was not a dungeon, but a forgotten castle in Buda. He spent over a decade in confinement. Some say he was treated like a noble, captive, allowed to ride, to read, even to take a wife. Others say he was isolated and tortured, kept in the dark with only his demons for company. But the truth? It lies somewhere in between. The man who had impaled tens of thousands now waited and watched and plotted. Outside, the world changed again. In 1475, the tides of war shifted. The Ottomans had pushed deeper into Europe, threatening the very heart of Christendom. Wallachia had fallen into chaos under Radu's rule. Nobles changed sides, fortresses crumbled, alliances bled. Suddenly, the West needed monsters again, and Vladi was still here. So after nearly 13 years, he was released. A man long presumed broken, vanished into history, returned. He was older, meaner, and more dangerous than ever. The Hungarians, desperate to use him against the Ottomans, backed his claim to Wallachia once again. In 1476, with a small army of Hungarian and Moldavian troops, Vlad rode back into his homeland one last time. But the land no longer knew him. The people were shattered, the nobles divided. Ottoman agents whispered in the shadows. Old ghosts followed his footsteps. Still, Vlad seized the throne. For a few short months, he was voivode again. But it was not the same. Power had shifted. His enemies were not just abroad, they were already within the gates. He didn't have time to rebuild, didn't have time to purge, didn't have time to rule through terror again. Only time to die. His end came suddenly, without drama, without ceremony. Some say it was an ambush, Vlad's small army surrounded by Ottoman cavalry near Bucharest. Others say he was betrayed by his own men, that assassins were paid in gold to do what armies couldn't, that one of his closest allies switched banners in the middle of battle. All we know is this: by the end of 1476, Vlad the Impaler was dead. They say his body was found headless in the mud, riddled with wounds. The Ottomans took his severed head and preserved it in honey, then sent it to the Sultan in Constantinople as proof. It was mounted on a stake outside the palace walls, so that all who passed could see the death of the devil. The body? Lost, vanished, buried without name or honor. No tomb, no marker, just whispers. But death did not end him. His legend only grew. Across Wallachia, peasants still spoke his name with dread and awe. Some believed he would rise again, that his soul had been cursed to wander the forests he once filled with death, that he had never truly died. In Saxon towns and German cities, pamphlets told stories of unspeakable cruelty, of blood feasts, of impalement fields that stretched to the horizon. These were not histories, they were nightmares in ink. In time, those nightmares took a new form. A name, reshaped by rumor, crossed the borders of reality: Dracula. By the time Bram Stoker wrote his Gothic novel in 1897, Vlad was no longer remembered as a prince. He had become something else: a myth, a vampire, the immortal Count of Darkness. But the truth? The real Vlad? He was worse. He didn't need to drink blood. He made rivers of it. He didn't lurk in castles. He ruled them. He wasn't a shadow, he was a spectacle. His greatest weapon was not his sword. It was the fear that came before it. And even centuries after his death, that fear lingers. In the forests of Romania, in the ruins of Poenari, in the old villages where mothers still warn children, don't go out after dark, or Dracula will find you. The voivode who made fear into law was finally captured. No more fortress, no more throne, no more forest of stakes to shield him, only ropes, chains, dirt. They say his enemies dragged him from the battlefield like a feral animal. Mud clung to his face, his armor was cracked, his eyes wild. Men who feared to look at him in life now dared to lay hands on him in death. They didn't kill him quickly. That would have been mercy. Instead, they made it a show. The day of his execution came like a storm: thick clouds, wet soil, and the sound of drums rolling across the valley. In a square outside the city walls, a scaffold had been built. Not a platform of justice, but a stage of spectacle. One final performance for the voivode who once turned murder into ritual. By dawn, the crowd had gathered. Thousands, peasants, nobles, merchants, even foreign dignitaries. They came not out of hatred, but curiosity. How do you kill a man who made death into theatre? Some expected fire, others a sword, but what they got was slower, meaner. They tied him to a post, stripped of armor, blood caked on his beard. His hands were bound in iron cuffs. His head was forced upright with cords tied to hooked poles. His spine arched like an animal ready for butchery. The guards didn't speak. They didn't need to. A wooden stake long, sharpened, soaked in oil was dragged into view. The same device Vlad had used on tens of thousands. It was poetic, cruel, fitting. But this stake was not yet upright. It was lying flat, waiting like a hungry beast. They laid him on his back, held him down. The crowd surged forward. Some gasped, some cheered, some turned away. Then the work began. Pain doesn't start with the wound. It begins with the anticipation. Vlad didn't scream, not at first. But as the stake was inserted slowly, carefully, with the precision of men who'd watched him do it to Othershey's body arched violently. His hands clawed at the restraints, the cords bit into his skin. The wood pressed deeper, past flesh, through muscle, grinding bone. He had ordered this punishment hundreds of times. He had designed it to be slow, to last hours, sometimes days. Now it was his turn to endure it. The crowd stood in grim silence. You could hear everything. The snapping of teeth biting through his own tongue, the gurgle in his throat, the hiss of breath dragged through blood, the creak of wood as it lifted beneath his twitching frame. And then the scent. It wasn't just blood. It was something older. Hot iron, sweat, urine, the sickly sweet rot of punctured intestines. It wrapped around the air like incense from hell. Children began to cry. Some women fainted, but no one left. Because history doesn't blink. And Vlad, even dying, refused to give them the pleasure of weakness. He didn't beg, didn't cry for mercy. His mouth opened only to spit blood at the faces of the nobles below, and his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, never shut. The sun crawled higher. Flies gathered. Birds circled overhead, cautious. And then, after what felt like an eternity, something shifted. His body twitched one last time. A shudder, a long, shallow breath, and then stillness. No scream, no final words, just the soft, horrible silence of a man who had outlived his myth. The executioner raised a bloody cloth. It was done, but the crowd didn't cheer. They didn't laugh. They stood quiet, unsure, because what had they just seen? A tyrant brought to justice, or the final gasp of something older, darker, and more necessary than anyone dared admit? Even his enemies feared the void he left behind. The stake stood tall, casting a long shadow across the square, and at its peak, skewered like meat, was the body of Dracula. Aftermath. No one claimed his corpse. No tomb was carved. No priest dared speak a rite. His remains were left for days, exposed to the sun and the vultures, until only bone and blood-stained cloth remained. Eventually, the Ottoman soldiers packed what was left into a box and sent it to Constantinople. His head was preserved in honey. They say the Sultan smiled as it was delivered, a mockery of the man who once made him retreat. But even then, the fear did not die. Some whispered that it wasn't really Vlad, that the body was a decoy, that the true voivode had vanished into the mountains, waiting to return, that his soul could not be killidanly buried in shadow. And when the wind howled through the passes and children disappeared in the woods, the people still spoke his name. Because no one ever forgets the man who built a kingdom on terror. Not even death. The Impaler was dead, but his shadow remained. After Vlad's execution, Wallachia did not find peace. The throne passed from hand to hand, as it always had, through betrayal, through blood. His brother Radu, the Ottoman favorite, ruled for a time, but even he died young, poisoned by the same court that once embraced him. Wallachia slipped back into chaos. The nobles who had betrayed Vlad soon turned on each other. The boyars squabbled, foreign armies returned, villages burned. Justice, order, stability, the things Vlad had enforced with terror collapsed. The people remembered, They remembered the cruelty, yes, but they also remembered the roads that had once been safe, the thieves who vanished, the nobles who feared the law more than they feared each other. Under Vlad, there had been blood, but there had also been silence, predictable, controlled. Now, there was only noise. Hungary prospered, the Ottomans grew stronger, but Wallachia fractured. And somewhere, in the ruins of Poenari Castle, stone by stone reclaimed by vines, the silence grew louder. Vlad was gone, but his legend was just beginning. In the decades after his death, stories began to circulate not only in Wallachia, but across Europe. Some were based in truth, others were lies dressed in horror. German pamphlets printed lurid tales of Vlad's reign, of children impaled for stealing fruit, of wives murdered for being unfaithful, of guests boiled alive in iron cauldrons. They said he bathed in blood, that he drank it, that he feasted beside the dying and raised his goblet when they screamed. Was it propaganda? Probably. But it didn't matter. The West had found something irresistible, a villain too evil to ignore. The name Vlad Dracula spread like wildfire, carried on the tongues of merchants, monks, travelers, across borders, across generations. In Wallachia, he became both a curse and a folk hero. Some condemned him. Others lit candles at his ruined castle, whispering prayers in secret. A protector, a punisher, a necessary evil. And then, in the 19th century, something changed. A man named Bram Stoker, an Irish writer, with a taste for the macabre, discovered the name Dracula in old texts while researching Eastern Europe. The name intrigued him. It sounded ancient, cruel, regal. He borrowed it, bent it, reforged it. But the creature he created was not Vlad the Impaler. It was something worse and yet strangely familiar. A vampire, an immortal. A predator who lives in a castle, drinks the blood of the living, and moves through the world not with armies, but with seduction, sickness, and fear. In the West, this Dracula became a symbol of Gothic horror, of repressed desire, of the monster within. But in Romania, the true story remained buried beneath ash and moss. Because for them, Vlad was not fiction. He was history, and history, no matter how dark, leaves its mark. Today, his name is everywhere. In films, novels, games, in haunted tours and black t-shirts. The vampire who drinks blood, the count in the castle, the pale figure in the cape. But behind the fiction, behind the fang and fog, lies a deeper truth. Vlad Dracula was not a myth. He was a prince, a warlord, a man forged by betrayal and raised in captivity. A child who learned power from chains and fear from silence. A ruler who chose terror over trust, cruelty over compromise, violence over virtue. And he won, for a while. But what does it say about us? That centuries later, we remember him not as a tyrant, but as a legend. That we turned a butcher into an icon. That we dressed horror in romance. That we renamed impalement immortality. Maybe it's because evil is easier to face when it's wrapped in story. Or maybe because part of us envies what he became. Unstoppable, feared, remembered. In the end, his real legacy is not in the blood he spilled, but in the fear he planted, a fear that never truly died. Next, we'll travel further into the shadows of power and cruelty, uncovering the Mongol emperor who flayed his enemies alive and built pyramids from skulls. History doesn't sleep, and neither do its ghosts.